Welcome, everybody, to Geekvice episode 239, proving any vice with enough geek can become a virtue. My name's Morph. That man's Kip. Wait a second, that isn't Kip. That's Eddie, the amazing podfather of the podcast arcade, the host of Daydream Instruction Manual, Falcon Punch Thunderdads, Mega Paranormal Dads, and probably something else I'm missing. Welcome, Eddie.
Hey, Aaron.
Did I get all of them in there?
I bet I butcher your guys' code names.
Oh, you can. Yeah, honestly, at this point, everybody pretty much knows who we are. It's not really it's not really a mystery. So you can call me Aaron. It's okay. It's all right.
You're still mysterious to me, though.
So,
no, man, thank you for inviting me. It's been way too long.
Yeah, it has been, and Kip is probably going to be really pissed that I have you on and he's not here, but, that's what he gets when he goes to Vegas and does his things in Vegas.
Sometimes the stars just line up a certain way. You just can't change it. He and I get to see each other briefly when he's in town for work, but lately I think he and I and a lot of things have just been so dang busy with other life things that it's just hard to get that to line up,
Yeah, I get it.
As unglamorous as that part is.
Oh, hey, and I figured out why I wasn't seeing us go live was my YouTube decided to switch, and instead of being on the Geekvice YouTube channel, I was looking at it from my own personal YouTube channel, which doesn't have any videos on it. So now I see that the stream is healthy and everything's there, and so if there's anyone out there that is watching us live, they can chat at us in the little chat on the YouTube things.
So we are live right now.
We are live on YouTube right now. People can go to our YouTube channel and find us.
Come on. Late night, some tea time, Eddie, some water time with Morph.
Yeah, it's on a Tuesday night. So, okay, we have a lot of stuff to go into, and I'm going to warn everybody now because this will probably become a little bit more emotional of a topic, but this is something. Get your box of Kleenexes out, because there will probably be some sobbing from either one of us. But you know what? You guys can just deal with it and enjoy laughing and making fun of us at our heartache and sorrows.
Cue the Bruce Banner music from the 80s Hulk.
Yes.
That's the saddest music in the world.
Oh man, I should have pulled that up because that kind of segues directly into the latest news that's happened in the world of geek. Stan Lee passing away at 95 years old, and it's not like we all didn't see this coming, but god damn, is it just kind of one of those. It's like hit me right here.
Yeah, it does. It's like you said, the man's 95. The man was 95. I mean, and for me, it's tough, right? Death for me is interesting. I have a interesting relationship with death. I think we all do on some level.
Yeah.
I'll put it for anybody who's listening or watching and who's about our age, maybe late 30s, early 40s. Maybe at this point in time, you've had someone leave you in the form of death. But it's interesting because when someone who is around 95, that's a long time.
Yeah.
And you look at what he got, the life he lived in 95 years. That's something else.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's the impact that he had on so many people. Like I saw in going back and looking at interviews and stuff that he had done, and at one point, I think it was shortly after the first Spider-Man movie, somebody had asked him what he wanted his to be thought of in his legacy, and he said, I just wanted to be known as a good writer. I just want people to say, hey, that guy was a good writer, a good storyteller, and gosh darn, I liked what he did.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even necessarily that he said that he would go to the movies and he wouldn't actually, like, he wouldn't watch the movies and go, man, I really, that's a really good character. He just would go to the movies and watch the other people react to, and to Spider-Man on the big screen, and how that, like, how that impacted them, and then that made him feel good. And it's just like, he was just he just seemed like such a good person. And
that is what makes him stand out, is that, I mean, he became, in a weird way, and this is where, like, there's all this mythos, or this gravitas behind his persona, when he would do cameos. I remember when I saw him in Mallrats.
Oh yeah.
And it was just like, oh my gosh, that's Stanley, and it's one of those things that, like, and I think, and maybe in some regards, some people went on to kind of, he was kind of like the face in a way for Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe some people felt that maybe pulled away from some of the other creators. I don't know. I think there's a lot of discussion to be had with that, as far as, like, as Marvel gained more and more popularity, and some of the other creators there, if maybe his contribution kind of started to kind of, like, because, like, he got more spotlight than maybe some other creators there did.
Yeah. Well,
I know that gets brought up.
Yeah, well, and that was a conflict. I mean, when Spider-Man, there was a big thing on the fight between Stan Lee and oh shit, why did his Ditko, right?
Yeah.
That the artist for Spider-Man, and I'm sure when that first happened, there was some controversy between the two of them, and some hard feelings, but, like, as Stan Lee became more and more popular, all his interviews, like, he didn't say that he created. He said he couldn't have done. He told the stories. It wasn't him that created the characters. It was the artists, and he gave a lot of props to a lot of the artists he worked with.
Yep.
Because it wasn't just Ditko. There was others that created. That helped bring the image, this idea of a character to life. And
Right.
it was something else that really hit me, was when I started going and looking up all the characters that he created. And everybody knows about Spider-Man and the Hulk. Those are big ones he created, but he also created things like Daredevil and Ant-Man and the X-Men. Like, the X-Men
Right.
was one that he created them. It was his idea, but it wasn't. The X-Men was a failed property until Chris Claremont came in and started writing for it. And
Right.
that doesn't, but it's still, there might never have been a Chris Claremont X-Men run if it wasn't for Stan Lee.
Yeah. It's so funny. There was that He-Man documentary there was the Toys That Made Us on Netflix.
Yeah.
And also there's another He-Man documentary on Netflix.
What? 2?
Oh, like, I Have the Power. How many He-Man documentaries do we need? We need
Yeah,
more. But what was interesting in those both documentaries was to see interviews with the two gentlemen who are created with creating He-Man, and there's some animosity between those guys, because one guy had the idea and the other guy took the idea and fleshed it out to what we know it to be. And I feel like, and I don't know all the nuances, and there's people who are well more read into the history of all of this.
Sure.
But being part of a creative process with our podcast group, and also just co-creating with other people, seeing documentaries like that, and also reading and knowing a little bit about not just Marvel but other comic book creations too. It's all collaborative.
Right.
And then what happens is, yeah, there may have been that initial idea, it may have been fleshed out initially, but over time it gets, fleshed out and grown and becomes better because of the collaboration. So yeah, I think trying to figure out who the heck is it's tough. I can only imagine.
Yeah, but I mean, I just look at it and I go, you know what? I look at it as it's not Stan Lee's impact on the comic book world and everything that has spun from the comic book world is, whether he was the creator for it or not, he had an impact. DC wouldn't be the comic book company it is today without what Stan Lee did for Marvel.
No, it's true. Stan Lee to me also is one of those guys. He had a natural charisma and likability and a love of people about him that, like, even people who weren't fans of comic books, like, were gravitated towards Stan Lee.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, I think of even people like, family members I have who may not be giant comic book people, but when they see them, when Stan Lee pops up, they think it's charming and cute and awesome when he has a cameo in a movie, because of his, contribution and his passion, essentially, for what he was doing. So for me, he's almost like this. He's like this wonderful, like, not gatekeeper. He's almost like a Heimdall. Like, he's this like gate.
Yeah.
He like welcomes people into the world of comics, and not even just Marvel comics, just kind of breaking down a barrier for people. I mean, I was talking to a guy at work today, and he said, I kind of missed the whole comic book thing. I just think I'm just not really a comic book kind of guy. And my response was, you haven't read the right comic yet.
Right.
And I'm like, I go, saying you're not a comic book person is kind of like saying you're not like a movie person or a TV. There are people who don't like movies and TV, and that's their own call. But most people like that kind of, like something on television or a movie. They just got to find the right movie.
Yeah.
And for me, the big thing with comics was discovering as I got older that it was more than just superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
Not whamming on superheroes. That's kind of my go-to thing. But
there's so much more.
So much more out there. And having someone like Stan Lee kind of be this ambassador to comics in general, just this funny, doesn't take himself seriously, guy that people just love to celebrate. I mean, there's just nothing wrong. He's a great dude, man.
Well, and you talk to him as you refer to him as kind of the Hemdall, the gatekeeper of, of this idea. And it's kind of funny that you say that, because I was talking to some people today, and they made the comment that they didn't, growing up, they weren't into comics. It wasn't until Stan Lee made his cameo appearance in Mallrats in the like mid 90s, that they're like, oh, well, that guy writes comic books, he seems kind of cool, I should check out some comic books. And then they, then they enjoyed some comic books. Like, it wasn't, and they weren't, they didn't turn into the Simpsons, comic book store guy, but they enjoyed the stories that Stan Lee helped create, whether he physically did it like he did for Spider-Man, or he just did it by influence because he had wrote something. He had wrote the characters the way he did. He created characters that people could relate to and fall in love with. So then someone else tried to do something just like that. They tried to create another character and create that same kind of impact. And that wouldn't have happened without, without Stan Lee. So
it wouldn't. I'm finding out some real-time news here, Aaron. Breaking story. What's going on, Sharon?
He got admitted to UNL.
Oh, that's so exciting. my oldest daughter Daphne just got accepted, correct, to UNL for college.
Way to go!
University of Nebraska Lincoln. Well done, kid.
Exciting.
Where is she? Is she over in the?
She's downstairs.
That is so exciting. How did she find out just now?
She got a big envelope.
Oh,
nice.
That is so cool.
Oh, there you go. Look at that. Sending the kid off to college.
I'm not ready for this stuff, man.
Yeah, I'm glad it's happening to you first.
You found it out on Geekvice. My oldest daughter is going to UNL.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Yep, that's going to be a Geekvice first that we are announcing. We're going to turn into now a college. What is it? The signing day. We need to create a little table for her to like sign. Sign her letter of intent, and she has to choose from a couple different hats.
Exactly.
I've seen them do it on ESPN. I really don't know what it is. I was never like. Nobody wanted me to go to their college, so yeah.
I'm fairly certain in saying that I think on both sides of our family, she'll be the first Husker.
Ooh,
so there's that.
There you go. Right? Yeah, that's pretty. That's actually really surprising that would be your first Husker in the family, considering you live in Nebraska. That's
right.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I thought everybody in Nebraska was from the Huskers.
Yeah, right. I'm a technical school guy. I'm from the East Coast anyway. You know this.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
I remember growing up watching television shows like the reruns of The Twilight Zone. Back in the day, and this is before I was born, but once again, rebroadcasts right before like a certain Disney movie, like if it was like Old Yeller or Davy Crockett or something like that, Walt Disney himself would actually give a little talk, like a little brief, like introduction, and with the Twilight Zone, you had what's his the Twilight Zone guy.
Oh, the actor guy?
No, the guy that would introduce it every time. He was like,
God, what was that guy's name? He was the voice. Who?
You're entering the Twilight Zone.
Yes, yeah.
Anyway, are you looking it up?
I was trying to. It wasn't Rod Sterling, was it?
Rod Sterling, yes.
Yes, yeah, it was Rod Sterling, not Sterling. Sterling. Sterling is a different guy.
So, and even there was a show that was on briefly in the '80s called Jim Henson's Storyteller.
Yeah, I do remember that show.
If you've not seen it, and anyone watching has not seen this show, look this up. It's so good. But it's kind of like Jim Henson's version of the Twilight Zone. Anyway, all of these different entertainment things had one thing in common. The creator or someone involved in the creation of it would take time to break the fourth wall and talk to the audience about what they were about to enjoy.
Right.
And as a kid, for me, it created this great little peek into the world of making these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was kind of a late comer to the world of comic book reading, but when I did, and guys online are posting these, and I love reading them all. It's those Stan's soapbox.
Yes.
Yep. Where he would share little nuggets of like real life wisdom,
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah.
And they were they were sweet, and they were like, they were heartfelt, and they meant well, and for me, when you start taking, like, the whole point of storytelling. And you said it right there. Like, he would watch people's reactions instead of watching the story and critiquing his own story. He'd be like, I care more about how people are soaking it up.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that seeing other creators kind of do the same thing. When I saw him doing that, I was like, having him reach out and connect to you and me and whoever else in that way creates this kind of interpersonal relationship,
Yeah, it really does. And it's kind of I love listening. So the same way with like his soapbox stuff that he would put into like at the end of because it was like at the end of the comic book, like it was like in the last like it was like in the advertisements parts
like
of the comic book. And but then there was also like when the first Spider-Man movie came out, I was trying to see if I had my DVDs up here and I don't have them up here, but there was a DVD that came in with if you purchase like I think it was like the box set of this first Spider-Man movie, and it had another DVD in there that was like monsters. Gosh, I can't remember what it was, but it was Stan Lee. It was just an interview with Stan Lee, and he talked about creating Spider-Man and how he went about creating it and what he some of the stuff he did to not just Spider-Man but all the other characters, the Hulk and like just some of the thought that he put into it that you just looked at and go, oh well, that's just that's just nothing. That doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
Like Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, all of these like the same letter names. Like he did that on he did that on purpose because he would keep forgetting the character names because he would refer to them as the Hulk or Spider-Man and he would forget their actual names. And so he gave them the same letter so he only had to remember one letter and then he would remember what their names were.
Like, and it's a smart move because they feel like they pull you into that world, you know?
Yeah. And it's just those little things that I love. I loved watching that DVD. I watched that thing probably 2-3 dozen times, just sitting there and just picking out all the little things because I'm not creative. I'm not a creative person. I do this podcast because I like to talk, kind of, and I have ideas and opinions, and this is a avenue for me to throw my opinions out there. And the worst somebody could do is tell me I'm an idiot and not listen.
Well, I'll tell you one thing you do right, you do well is you last year's Christmas special. You acted really well. You're a great voice actor there.
Well, I think I've actually gotten better at that reading books to my kids because I always remember like my mom was real big. My mom was an English teacher and a librarian. And so she would always read books to us when we were going to bed, and she would read books like The Black Cauldron, and these books that were at the time were way too big for what I should be reading. But she would read it, and she would have just they weren't full on voices like a voice actor would do, but they were just inflections enough that you could tell who was talking, like who the idea was. And so I try to do that same thing with the kids, especially when we're reading a book that I really enjoy. I'll try to give a little higher pitch voice for the females and maybe a deeper voice for a bad guy. Just little stupid things like that. And so I find it fun. I like it. And I think it gets my kids into the story a little bit more. And my favorite.
Like when you're reading Lenny Vernon, Badass Truck.
Yes. That is not one that I've started reading to the kids, but it can be put on the list.
It's got great panels like this.
I love it. Oh, those guys are so great having them on too. That was so much fun.
So much fun.
Oh
yeah, man. I think, especially, this is funny. This isn't Stan Lee related, but it does tie to comics. I think it was you. It may have been you who posted a picture online of you watching a Superman movie on DVD.
Nope, that wasn't me.
Okay,
it was probably Billy.
Maybe Billy. It was the death of Superman, and it had an 80-year sticker on the side. Superman's 80 years old.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like this year. And I look at my wife and I go, "Are you ready to feel old?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" I go, "I remember in my school as a kid, we had a 50th birthday party for Superman."
Yeah.
And I was like, "That was 30 years ago."
She's
like, "No." But it's so great because I'll be honest, and I I try to avoid this conversation. I feel like it's not a healthy one to have, but it's going to happen when you have two. You have other publishers, but DC and Marvel are arguably the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like, and I may be wrong, but I felt like DC never had a Stan Lee.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and yeah, and I agree with you completely that I don't think DC has ever had a Stan Lee, but kind of like what I said before is, that doesn't mean that Stan Lee didn't influence everything that DC did, because they were always trying to equal the same level as Stan Lee in his writing, in his storytelling, and so the stories that Stan Lee told with Spider-Man and the Hulk and these flawed characters, they tried to replicate in the DC universe and write at that same level. And I'll admit, I mean, I think it worked at times. I mean, there is some stories that came out of DC that are so top notch that I'm just like, yeah, that is awesome. And none of those were written by Stan Lee, but they just didn't have that one person that that basically came up with all their stuff. And honestly, that's probably because Stan Lee was never hired by DC because they said he wasn't good enough.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that funny?
That's the thing, is Stan Lee got turned down by, he wasn't even gonna write comic books. The guy was just, wasn't even really a writer until his wife told him, no, you should give this a try.
Yeah.
And so he did, and look where he ended up, and it's just like, oh man, it's just crazy.
Another testament, and I know this is one of those things that, you and me and everybody else who we know who are podcasters and people who are independent comic book publishers and musicians and actors.
Mm-hmm.
This is the thing that might keep us going. It might be a little bit, whether or not it's delusional is maybe up for debate, but that's one of those things that, think about a world where Stan Lee didn't listen to his wife, you know?
Yeah.
Where he just did the thing that a lot of people do, and they pull the George McFly, I don't want to do that, I'm afraid of how it's going to be received. It's just one of those things. Like, if you feel it in you, you should just do it. Like, there's really no reason to not.
Well, and so that is actually a perfect segue for kind of the other thing that I want to talk about, and that's that's this idea of, can you really say no to a good idea, or an idea at all? It doesn't even have to be a good one. I mean, think of this. Stan Lee didn't think that was a good idea. He's whatever. No, that's not. And then he's like, okay, fine, I'll try it. And then after he did it, he decided, yeah, I don't really want to do this. And she's like, no, just write the one story that you want to write. And that ended up being the Fantastic Four.
Oh, wow.
Like, that.
He's not good enough.
Yeah.
That's like the most iconic comic book.
None of the comic book companies wanted the Fantastic Four. They didn't want that idea. Like, that wasn't what was out at the time. And then he wrote the Fantastic Four, and skyrocketed because it was amazing.
And it was different.
Yeah.
We can go off on old man tangents on business and how, so many businesses love to pride themselves on being, forward thinking and cutting edge and all that stuff. The reality is there's so few companies that are really like that.
Yeah.
And that most companies tend to try to play it as safe as possible.
Yeah.
And I get it. You can't risk everything every day. That doesn't make any sense. But on the same token, to not even entertain, for a fact the reason they said no is because his writing style, maybe the the silliness, some of the weird humor he'd inject. They were just like, "What is this? This is
Well, and it
this
was
is
different. It was different from anything else at that time. It was
yeah,
just different, and everybody fears what's different. And but
yeah,
but it kind of goes to this idea. So like I have all these ideas in my head of different things I want to do and different things to try. And I mean, you're the perfect guy to talk to about this because you're in one, two, three, four. Are you four podcasts? Is that all you are? Is four?
It's 4 podcasts.
Four podcast people. Do you hear that? Four. He does four. I barely have time for one. And he does four.
Well, I'll show you the copy of Red Dead Redemption 2 that's still in the plastic.
Yeah. I don't even own it. So, yeah.
There, if we can go into this if you want, like ideas and
Yeah.
you
Because
know,
because it's this thing that like what if one of those ideas that you say no to is your Stanley writing the Fantastic Four?
oh dude, I mean, this is where like, and I feel like when with anything you create, so my thought, and this is something that people can take away, keep, throw in the garbage, whatever. Um, I feel like if you're gonna bother creating something, you have to, on some level, be excited about it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
or like our day jobs, there has to be an adequate trade off for it. You and I work in different places, but we kind of work in a similar field, I believe.
Yeah.
And arguably, it might not be the definition of creative, but there is creation happening with what we do.
Oh, absolutely.
And do I necessarily like wake up and am I in love with that as a thing? It's a different type, I think, of motivation on that one. And versus an idea that is solely, and maybe not solely yours, but yours and a small team of people who you have a common understanding with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the compromises, if there are any, are few, and because you're also passionate about it, you're willing to make certain ones, versus like a day job where the definition of it is compromise.
Yeah.
So it's like Geekvice is Geekvice because it is yours and John's vision. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's nobody weighing in saying like, hey, I think you should know, because it's completely, and when somebody has that, that's deeply empowering.
Yeah.
You know? And I feel like those types of creations can't help but inform other avenues of your life. I think even though it eats up a ton of my free time, I still feel better when I look at something that I've helped create.
Oh, yeah.
Than when I've enjoyed someone else's creation. And I'm not knocking that because, like I said, I'm kind of missing some of the fun activities. Like, you know, I got a video game. It's taking me forever to get through it because I don't have any real time to play it. Al from Omaha Underground Comics popped over here a couple days ago and just visited for a bit. And we went downstairs to the podcast studio area, and I started playing the new Spider-Man game. Have you played that?
No, I haven't.
Dude, it's so good.
That's what I heard. I haven't purchased it yet.
I highly recommend it, even if for a holiday purchase for you and the kids. The kids will love it.
Yeah.
But it's just taking me forever. I'm like forgetting how the buttons work because I'm like, oh, it's been 2 weeks since I touched this thing. And but yeah, I'm with you. The big thing for me is you do get that weird idea panic. Like you almost want to try to do everything that pops in your head.
Yes.
And I've had to start. Years ago, I interviewed 2 artists, Tony and Leah Ferguson, and they had a term for it in the art community. It sounds kind of brutal. It's called killing your babies. And the idea is that you may have a thing that you're in love with, but it's pulling you away from doing this other thing that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And you got to know which ones to kind of let go for a while. And yeah, that's a constant thing, I think, when you're making a podcast, making a comic book. You're doing 4 podcasts. You know, I mean, you can't produce 4 podcasts the same way you do one.
Sure.
That's one thing I've learned. But the first couple of years of me trying to do multiple shows, I thought I was going to be able to do all of them weekly, and I certainly almost pulled it off for a while. But there's no way I can do that.
Yeah.
And so we've had to start doing alternating schedules where every other week is a different show, and then I kind of cluster and then release when I can. So anybody paying attention will notice that the releases have been a lot more, I'm not going to say spotty, but they haven't been as regular. And that's kind of the sacrifice when you choose to do multiple shows. That's been my thing. And it's kind of the looming specter to me is, do you give up 1 or 2 of those things to be more regular with the other ones, or do you just continue to do the 4 because, like you said, like which?
Yeah, how do you know when to say no? You know, like oh well, but because if you enjoy them, I mean that's the thing. It's like I look at this and I've been there for a while. I was running the YouTube channel for Geekvice, and I was doing game playthroughs and things like that, and I was having a lot of fun doing them. And then I was on the old laptop, and the old laptop crapped out, and I haven't started it back up yet. And but it was kind of one of those. It was like it just took so much time to one, play the game and record it, and then go through and edit it so that it was so that you didn't get all the dead air and load times that are in games. Which, although with the new machine, the load times are way faster, which is amazing. Yep. But you still have those times that you got to edit through, and then you got to you got to render it all so that it looks good when you put it up on YouTube, and that would take, I mean, for an hour long, or a 30-minute, because I tried to keep it at 30 minutes, a 30-minute long episode, you're looking at it in an hour per episode.
Yeah.
And then that's not even counting the upload time, because that then takes time, and then the processing on the YouTube side of it. It just adds up and adds up, and I only have about, I have from about 9 o'clock at night until I decide it's time to go to bed, to work on it, because like you, we have a day job, and not only do I have a day job, I also have 2 kids that are in way too many damn activities. Mm-hmm. But I can't tell them no.
Right.
Like, I mean, no, sons, you cannot go and enjoy playing soccer. You're gonna need to sit here at the house so that Dad can do his podcast stuff. I can't do that.
This is where you're getting into some pretty weedy territory. We can go into it. I want to. Let's go.
Let's do it. Let's bring out the machete. We'll cut down the weeds.
Let's do it. Get my hair cut on top of it. Look at this butt.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, that's looking long. Well, coming from a guy who's got no hair.
Yeah, true. Any hair is long for Aaron.
Right.
So like we said, like I said, doing, and Billy's probably a great person to talk to about this too. I mean, the guy's in so many different things.
Oh yeah.
And just like what you said, I mean, I got 3 kids. 2 of my 3 are in that age where they got very much their own thing going on. Mm-hmm. At this point. They're mobile. They've got cars. They can get to where they need to get under their own power, usually. I won't get into the specifics, but we've had some vehicle drama.
Always.
But, when, and this is about balance. It's a conversation about balance.
Sure.
It's when a person decides to pursue something that for them is meaningful, but doesn't necessarily provide resources, then all it really does for the family is pull you away.
Yeah.
Now, for the observant, and my wife was able to kind of point this out. She's like, before you were doing this, you were sad.
Right.
I tell you were sad. Ever since you have started doing this, you have been more enjoyable to be around. And not that I was some giant ogre, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
She's like, you've been more enjoyable to be around. You seem to have a lightness about you. And she's like, I feel like certain people in this world need to create and on their own terms. And if they don't get to do that, eventually it starts to take a toll.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are like that. I mean, not everybody is.
Sure.
I've had people tell me flat out, like, there's no way in heck I could do any of that. I don't want to do that. And that's fine too. No, yeah. Not everybody. Yeah. But the balance is huge. And that's something, I'll be honest, that I've been trying to kind of figure out even now, even to this, you know, the thing about what we do, this whole field of podcasting, you develop a relationship with your listeners. That's the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're sharing your personality and your thoughts with them. In a way, you know, not that we're not ripping off Mr. Lee, but similar to Stan Lee, you're blurring the buffer between separation. You're inviting them into your world.
Yeah.
Quick pause. I think your dog went so out of that room right now.
Oh, they're being all kinds of crazy. Hold on. Let me go let them out real quick.
No, you're fine. It was just funny looking at them stare at me.
You guys are a pain in my ass.
It was so funny.
Oh.
They were looking at you, but looking at me through the. I don't think he.
All right.
You couldn't hear what I was saying, could you?
Nope, not a single thing, but everybody else could. So
it was funny because the dogs were looking back at you, but they were looking at me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Eyes.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like down here in the kids' theater, we've gotten snow. We've already got snow on the ground, and so the dogs like can't spend the day outside because it's too damn cold. And so they're stuck inside. So now whenever I'm down here, it's like every 2 minutes they're like, "Oh, I went outside." Like, but you're just gonna
outside behind you right there?
Yeah, that's a walkout basement. So they go out to the backyard back there. So
nice.
Yeah, they're enjoying the cold now.
Are they? Yeah, our dog is the opposite. She hates the cold. Her breed's from Cuba.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Not much snow in Cuba.
Nope.
But yeah, man, that has been the difficulty. Not difficulty. That's been a learning process for me. Has been balancing the time creating the things, and also the other time trying to authentically, like, as we do this, we start, you know, meeting people and wanting to do things and be present and and be at places and things, and you get invited to things. But the other side to all of that is we have families.
Yeah. Yeah.
and jobs that, at least mine especially, has gotten more and more demanding over time. And you got to be careful that the thing that brought you joy doesn't start bringing you misery.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I get that. And like that's part of the thing. And I think the Stan Lee's death kind of made me start thinking about things differently. Not in that like mortality type thing, what am I going to leave the world, but more like looking at the impact he had and what he did with it. And I look at it and I go, well, you know, hell, I'll throw it out now, which I don't think anyone who's ever listened to the shows I don't think I've ever brought this up on Geekvice, is one of the things that I would love to do is I would love to break down soccer games. I would love to go through and you could see it up on YouTube occasionally. Some people do it, but some of them actually really suck at doing it. They don't fully understand the movement of the players or what teams are doing or how they're approaching different tactics. And I love that side of soccer. I love the strategic side of soccer. And I would love to sit down and talk about each one of the sporting games and go through, and because I go to all of them. I haven't missed a sporting game yet. I've watched every single one of them, whether I'm at the game or on the away games I'm watching on TV. And it's like, I think that would be really cool. And then then I just sat down and said, okay, how much time would it take to do? And to do a video side of it where I'm pulling in clips from the games and editing those and marking stuff up on them and talking about them, it got to be where I was like, well, shit, that's going to take like probably anywhere from 10 to 15 hours a game to do. I don't have 10 to 15 hours a week. Sometimes 10 to 15 hours in 2 days, 3 days, because of midweek games. Like, I just wouldn't be able to do it. And so it's just, but then there's like those, it's like, man, I still have that itch. Like, I want to do that at some point. And I don't know, at some point maybe I'll sit down and just do one where I talk about it and I just do it by myself, like, and just talk about stuff. But even then it's like, I don't know. It's
I know what you mean, man. Podcasting, the only reason I even got started with podcasting was because originally, and I may have said this before, I don't know. Originally, I was writing and working on a play. And,
really?
Yeah. And the play, the story got so big in scope. I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to be able to actually do this. Like, it's going to take a massive budget. I mean, massive in the sense of like, and this was me estimating, but I'm like, this is going to be a $5,000 to $10,000 production.
Oh, jeez.
Before I even get like theater space rented and lighting done, and so I had this play, and it was mostly written, and at one point I'm like, I would like to finish this, but I kind of lost the passion for it when I realized that the reality of it, of me being able to actually produce this thing, was a long shot. Like not a long shot. It was completely impractical. I'd have to quit my job to do it right,
Mm-hmm.
And so I took a step away from it and was like, I really want to do something like that involves, discussion, creation, riffing. Comedy has kind of been a thing that I enjoy.
Yeah.
But even then too, I'm like that. So as I went down the list of different like medias or mediums is a better term, podcast started to kind of jump out as a do it on your own terms kind of thing.
Right.
And if you can record, you record. If you can't, you don't. And then you can get into this whole discussion of what successful podcasts do and how they post regularly and blah, blah, blah. And that's true. All that's true. But there's also a lot of podcasts out there too.
Yeah.
And so for me, the real driving force behind me even getting involved in it at all was this need to do something, but also this need to do something that fit my life,
Right.
And it's funny how, like, even in doing that, at least speaking for me, this has grown to a point where it has, I'm not going to say it's created problems. It hasn't created problems, but it's created at least, pockets of conflict.
Sure.
Nothing insane, but like one of my kids at one point was like, it was like, Dad, you're either working, hanging out with the family, or podcasting. That's about it. I was like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But it's better than the alternative of just like not doing anything,
I agree. Long term, and I'm not going to make any big announcements because I haven't really thought anything 100% through. But I think when you're creating anything, and especially when you're creating, kind of like what you said, I mean, you were doing those videos, and right now it's kind of taking a back burner.
Yeah.
There's no real rush to do it. I think with when you're producing 4 shows and other things, as you continue on, at some point the discussion is, do you keep doing 4 shows until whenever, or
Right.
do you look at a natural closing time and start to try to develop at least 1 or 2 of them a little bit more intently.
Right.
We have a lot of like you said, I have a lot of ideas. A couple of video series through those podcasts we've discussed, we've nailed down kind of a format. I'd love to do them, but it's just a matter of finding the adequate time.
Sure.
And like you said, your kid, my little girl, my 11-year-old's gonna look me in the eye and say, I want to do this, and you're gonna say no.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean that's how I ended up. I manage both my kids' soccer teams. I run the watchdog program at their elementary school, and I also have now this last fall I helped create a. Have you heard of the program called Girls on the Run? You have 3 girls.
Yep, I know of it.
There is no Boys on the Run. So there were a couple parents at our school that said, you know what, we want something to teach boys how to be good people. And not just good people, but also, hey, you know what? Life is hard and you're going to have to work through it. Things aren't going to be handed to you.
Yep.
And so we have created a program called Empower that is for boys 3rd and 4th grade. I helped create the pilot program for that this last fall, and we're doing it again this in the spring with 3rd and 4th grade boys at the school that my kids go to. And
wow.
So, like, it's like I've got all those different things that are all things for my kids.
Yep.
And I love doing them. And my wife laughs at me because people, like, with the Empower program, I said, okay, since I'm head of the Watchdogs, I have access to a lot of dads. I will kind of help get this thing started, but I can't be relied on to be there all the time. I will help you try to get people to be there. I'll be more of a facilitator type thing. I'll be that go-between just to get you more information. And then as when we finished, so the whole program was 8 weeks long, and at the end of 8 weeks, the kids and the adults that were in it ran a 5K. And when we got done running the 5K, one of the moms who was really wanted this to happen walked up to me and said, "I thought you weren't going to help. I thought you were going to be involved, as for the whole thing." She's like, "Did you miss a single week?" And I'm like, "I think I missed the first week because of work."
Yeah.
And then and we met Tuesdays and Thursdays for 8 weeks right after school. And I was at all of them. I missed one day of 8 weeks. And but I couldn't, I mean, I looked at the kids and I sat, like, sitting down and talking to the kids and doing all that stuff. It was just like, I didn't want to not be there. Like, it was, it was one of those things. It was just like, it felt really good to be there. I felt like I was, providing something. I'm not really sure what, but, just, but it just gets in the way of other things,
It's very interesting, and I agree. Like, especially when they're that age, I'll offer a counterpoint too. Like, I have my 2 older daughters. One's 18 and one's 16, and they're involved in so much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Conceivably, realistically, I can't go to all of it. I can't. There's no way. And I mean, I could, but it'd be insane. one of them is in show choir. It's a totally Midwestern thing.
Yep, no, they have that down here too.
We did not have it in the East Coast. I'm telling, it might be there now. I don't know. I don't think so, but and it's this phenomenon where they literally go on tour. Like they have a season in which they are every weekend on a bus driving to different small towns and performing. And there are parents that will literally, and I'm not judging, this is not a judging statement.
No.
There are parents that will go to every single show.
Yeah.
They're there.
Yeah.
They're not missing a. I am not one of those parents. There's just, I remember, this is just me talking. I was involved in theater in high school and after high school. And I remember out of all the shows I did, all the different plays and performances, my family made it to one.
Yeah.
And I had a big family too, so it was no small feat to get everybody to the theater. And I remember not being as upset as you would think a kid would be, because for me it made sense. And granted, I wasn't 7, so a 7-year-old can't.
Yeah, that's different.
Mm-hmm. But when you're 17 or 18, what I realized was there's going to be a time in my life my parents aren't going to be there.
Right.
They're not, when I'm 25, 35 and up, they're not going to be at every major accomplishment I get in my life. My dad's not going to be there to tell me how proud he is, you know? And as a older teenager, it was actually kind of refreshing because it reminded me that I was doing that stuff for my own enjoyment, not for my family's, I guess. Does that make sense? We lost Aaron somehow. I can hear you. I told him to let the dogs out. Now he's got to let them. As all of who just heard me say, I don't go to all my kids. Judge me. No, I hear you perfectly fine.
Okay. Yeah. I was trying to do it so that it wouldn't interrupt you, and it didn't work very well. But
no, you're. But yeah, so we actually tell the girls we will make it to a few of their performances. In our defense, it's the same show every time.
Sure, sure. Well, and that's like, so my neighbors across the street, their daughter is, and she's actually, she's probably not watching tonight because it's 10:20 and she needs to be in bed. But their daughter, who she has pimped our show, our Geekvice show, a ton. Princess Jossie. She is awesome, and she's 13, I believe. 12 or 13. I think she's 13 now. And she performs at the Culture House here in Kansas City, which is they do musicals. And so she gets a full-on performance. I mean, they spend weeks practicing this stuff, and then they perform it for 3 or 4 shows on a weekend. And she understands that her parents aren't going to be there like for every one of those performances. Now, her mom volunteers and helps out, so she's there in the background, but that makes sense. And I think you're right. I think at that age of 12 to 13, I think is that time period where the kids can understand that, hey, mom and dad can't be at everything. Right. They can't do everything with you. At some point, you have to do something on your own. And as much as I think that would be that's good and healthy, and I completely get it, I also sit there and go, this last weekend I missed my son's soccer game because we were at a different event, and the entire time we were at that other event, I'm sitting there with my phone in my hand going, should I text him and find out how the game is? Should I see how, I kind of want to know how they're doing. Like, because you want to be there for them. And so,
Yeah.
It's
Well,
being a dad
yeah.
is hard.
Being a dad is hard, and the other side of that is like, whether you're ready or not, they're gonna grow.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Like what just happened to you tonight.
right, right.
She's gone, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, and I said this. I was like, the funny part about it. I remember when they were little was you read these books and you even notice the behavior changes, like from this age to this age,
Mm-hmm.
from 2 to 4 this will happen, and
Right, yeah.
and what happens as your child ages is that you begin to notice when they start exiting one phase and get into another one.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized was like, being a parent is just a series of phases. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
It's just, as soon as one is over and you figured it out, or one is like starting to wind down and you're like, I got it out, I figured it out. You're on to a new one and you got to figure it out again.
Yep.
And like basically being a dad is a constant state of discomfort.
Yes.
And I love it, and I don't want to miscommunicate that at all. Like, it's been, I love you. You never stop being a dad. That's the point.
Right.
But the way your kids need you changes.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, and I think it's important to point this out too, as my kids have gotten older, they have seen the necessity of their parents to have their own thing too. You know, like,
Yeah.
my Daphne, my oldest, has been like, this is important to you. You need to do it too, Dad. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
funny to hear kids counsel you back and say, like, don't, So it's a constant balancing act, man. Like, I remember, and I still do. I deal with this sometimes. I every so often get a little bit of guilt because I wonder if I've taken on too many creative pursuits.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does this pull me out of the equation too much?
Yeah.
And I try to stay aware of it. And I can't say that at some point there might not be a tweaking of the shows, if not even like a retiring of even one of them, or maybe even more. I think that's a natural thing. I think
Sure.
eventually like, not everything is meant to last forever.
Yeah.
But on the same token, I will always have to have some form of creation going on, because I could never just put all this down and not do anything.
Yeah.
It would eat me alive.
Well, and that's the thing is I find these like just even the coming down and sitting and like tonight's topic is kind of a little more serious than anything, but I've talked to John about this too. It's like just coming down and doing the podcast makes me feel better than if we miss a week because of you know not being him being out of town or not being able to make something work, or we can't get, or I'm sick, or I can't get down here in time, and for
Yeah.
whatever reason it doesn't happen that week. Like, I just feel a little less like me. I feel a little less joyful, and it doesn't mean that I'm like upset, like you said. It's not like I'm mad or that I'm a grump and nobody wants to be around me, but it's kind of the same way. It's really funny. My wife has actually made the comment to me too. Like, when I take the kids to soccer practice, and after I watch them play soccer, I come home, like, I could be pissed off from work beyond belief. Just nobody wants to deal with me. I take the kids to practice. I come back from practice, and she's like, "Yours seem a lot better now." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know what it is." Like, it's just you go out and you get to do that thing that you love. You get to see your kids do something that they love, and all of a sudden, like, the cares go away, and you're able to hit the reset button, and it just
Yeah.
feels better. So,
I agree. It's yeah, I think you always, if you're gonna be smart about it, you always need to kind of keep that inventory going, and make sure you're getting filled up enough, but you're also able to kind of take care of the other parts of your, like someone said, your life is like a garden, and you got to make sure everybody gets the right amount of water.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I like that.
No, it's true. I agree. That's been the biggest thing. I never really thought about how my time was spent until I started doing like the podcasts and seeing just how my time is so valuable. Money. We need money, and I'm all about it. But I tell you what, like they said, ask a dying man if he wants more time or more money.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like, I'll take the time. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
I swear that's an age thing too. And I remember hearing that when I was in my 20s. And I was like, stupid old man taking the time, take the money. And now I'm like the exact opposite. I was like, oh man, give me some more time, please. Please.
Yeah.
Coming back to Stan Lee.
Sure.
Didn't he narrate the Spider-Man cartoon, The Amazing Spider-Man and Friends, or something like that?
I think he did. I think he did the.
He narrated the beginning, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he did the voiceover at the beginning of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's done a bunch of stuff because he was. Now I should probably look it up, but I think in the Incredible Hulk TV show, he had a part in that too, and it wasn't like an acting part because that was kind of before that stuff, but he was. Oh, come on, give me the dang cast, stupid computer, Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to say he was, he wasn't executive producer because that was too high up for what he was. But I want to say he was in the creative director type role, like where he had some say in it. But yeah, he did a lot of stuff, man.
Yeah, that was probably my earliest exposure to him as a like persona or personality. Was probably the early Spider-Man and Friends cartoon.
Yeah.
Hearing his voice, and his kind of like New York, or was it like he had an accent that was it like a jerk? It was a New York accent.
Yeah, it was a New York accent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He had an accent, and he had kind of that cool kind of swagger to his voice when he was talking, and I was like, this guy sounds fun,
Yeah, he was. He was.
Even as a kid.
He was super cool. All right, that's probably a good place to wrap this up. I will. Well, let's go. Let's see. Where else can people find you, Eddie? If people want to follow you, where are the best places for them to follow you?
Too many places. I have been really terrible on Twitter lately. I've been so busy with everything I've done. I look at my Twitter and I just kind of like nod at it, like, "Hey."
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean.
I am on Twitter. Find me as Fuzzy Optimus. And then I'm on Facebook. Look up Eddie Fossler. For any of the podcasts that I produce, you said them: Daydream Instruction Manual, Falcon Punch Thunderdads, Paranormal Dads, and Make Eternia Great Again. Those are the 4 shows. We're on Facebook. We're all on Twitter. And I believe most of those shows, 2 of the 4 are on Instagram.
Oh, nice.
And you can find us. Just look for those names, and you'll find them. And yeah, we just try to have a good time, man. I remember the reason, and I won't get into this because we have to wrap up, but the reason I even bothered with 4 shows was because I remember someone said, if you have a specific topic you want to talk about, and it's specific enough, don't try to crowd them all in one show.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna exhaust your listeners.
Sure.
And breaking out into 4 shows was really actually a smart move because it really contained a lot of the ideas. But yeah, it's kind of a fool's errand.
I get it. I get it, man.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, if you want to find the Geekvice stuff, you know where to go. You can check out our blog at geekvice.blogspot.com. You can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/geekvice. I'm at Geekvice on Twitter. Kip is at Kip Killigan. You can follow us there. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel. You get awesome stuff like videos of video games that I've played, but you also get the video stuff where you get to see Eddie's lovely face. So it didn't break my computer, so it's still good. It's still good. You can also, of course, as always, you can reach us by email at geekvice@gmail.com. And I want to leave us with one quote that is from Seth Rogen on the passing of Stan Lee. He said, "Thank you, Stan Lee, for making people who feel different realize they are special."
I love it.
That is my favorite quote. That is my favorite thing that somebody has said that I've come across, and I've come across a lot of it. But Seth Rogen nailed it right there. That is Stan Lee to a T. So thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
This podcast is part of the Podcast Arcade Network.